So kia ora everyone, welcome to the first of the Badminton New Zealand community webinar series. We're really excited to be doing this. The reason for the series is really in my journey around Aotearoa, connecting with everyone earlier this year. The big piece of feedback that Badminton New Zealand received was that our associations, our clubs, they want the opportunity to connect with Badminton New Zealand and other associations more, have a bit of shared learning. So we're creating a little bit of a copy and paste culture where everyone learns from each other. So that's kind of the premise we're looking at here. We'll see how today goes. We do have another session in December, the 5th of December, I believe. That registration link is now available online for anyone who would want to join. And you're of course welcome to reach out as always at any point if you would like to suggest any topics for future. We will be taking requests and we will be partnering with Tennis New Zealand next year to deliver some shared webinar series again, as I know that Ali and the team do a fantastic job already with their series. So a little bit of I guess housekeeping before we get underway. For those who don't know, I am Sam from Badminton New Zealand. I'm the community manager, essentially responsible for overseeing our 25 associations and 250-ish clubs, really supporting each of them with anything that they need. So this is just one of those many topics. For those who would like to interact today, you can do so through the chat, fire questions through. I'm not actually able to see the chat at the moment, looking at the main screen. However, Colleen will be firing questions through to me on my phone so we can connect in with our presenters. How it will work is we will go presenter number one, and then we will connect into a Q&A for that person. So make sure we're starting with gaming funding. If you have any gaming questions, start with those. Don't save them to the end because Ben will have hit it off by then. So if anything does come into your mind later in the evening, look, fire it through anyway, and we'll do our best to answer it as Sandra and Colleen have an outstanding amount of knowledge here, and that's really why they're here today. So I would like to do a few introductions to our presenters, and then I'll pop away. We won't have to hear from me too much more, which will be fantastic. Firstly, a big thank you to our presenters. We're going to be starting with Ben Hodges, the National Grants Manager for NZCT. Really excited to have them join. NZCT is a massive supporter of badminton across Aotearoa, and I'm sure it's exactly the same in tennis as it is with all other sports. So really glad to have Ben join us. After Ben, we'll be speaking to David King. He oversees Te Manawa at Sport Manawa 2, and I hear from Sandra that he has a fantastic amount of knowledge that he's looking to share with us today. We'll then connect into Amy McKinnon, who is the Acting Event Development Manager for Tauranga City Council, previously having worked for ATEED up in Auckland. So that's a really important grant type that we don't really connect into too well in badminton. Amy will particularly be talking about events, so keep that in mind as you look through her presentation today. We'll also be having Sandra Lynch from Badminton Manawa 2 and Colleen Vandeler, my colleague, our office manager at Badminton New Zealand. They'll be jumping in and out throughout the sessions with any feedback or tips that they have. At the end, we will then have a bit of a pro tip session with them where if they have anything additional they'd like to add or any questions that you would like to answer, they'll be there for that. So Ben, over to you, mate, and thank you again for joining us.
All right, kia ora tātou. Ben from NZCT, I'm the grants manager. Very pleased to talk to you all tonight. Here's our presentation. I'm partnering with Sam here with the transition, so bear with us, please. So we're a Class 4 game machine society, and that, to be clear, we're a charitable 100% non-profit entity. So we all the profit that we make after all the costs of operating obviously are covered, go back to the community. So we're 100% non-profit, and we raise funding through gaming machines in venues around the country, pubs and restaurants around the country. Each year we award about, give or take, $40 million it's been in recent years across the country. And if you move on to the next slide, Sam. Thank you. So we'll talk about some funding principles of what sorts of things we fund. Look, mostly it's community sport, and that's because, sorry, and I'm also just working on some notes here on my screen. Right. So look, we invest in sport. I'm sort of preaching to the converted probably, but for all the good stuff about sport, it brings communities together. It gives young people life skills. It helps reduce the burden on the state in terms of helping people stay healthy. Keeps young people out of trouble. All those good stuff, and it's fun as well, right? And it's part of our New Zealand identity. So that's why we invest in sport, not for sport itself, but for the things that it helps and to do in communities. So something to bear in mind when you're making applications to us is thinking about how we don't fund sport as such. We fund what sport does for the community. So do keep that in mind. We also do other community good, such as rescue services, education, culture and arts, but really the bulk of it is sport. Maybe about 80% of that $40 million goes to sport. So I'm talking to the right audience tonight. Now, we raise money locally in venues across the country, and we try and return that money back locally mostly. So 92% of our funds that we raise go back into that same community. Maybe about 8% gets clipped off to put into causes of national significance that benefit everyone throughout the country. And for example, Special Olympics New Zealand has they reach into every corner of New Zealand, and so we do that. So the types of grants we do operational grants. So that's things like uniforms, equipment, travel and accommodation. We do salaries and wages, more at the association level than the club level, but we still do a little bit at the club level here and there. And also we help with event costs. I'll just double check my notes here, Sam, before we move on. We don't do entry fees, by the way. And in terms of salaries and wages, we're more interested in funding roles that are at the coalface, less interested in back office type roles, and more interested in participant facing roles. And so in terms of association level, that might be coach developers or officials developers, or game development officers and that sort of thing is more appealing than general manager or finance managers, those sorts of back office roles. And at clubs, badminton clubs, I guess you don't typically have the big sort of structures that other codes have. So maybe thinking on the spot, we probably don't receive a lot of applications for those salaries and wages from badminton clubs. But certainly things like uniforms, travel, equipment, they're things we do. That's our bread and butter. But if you move on to the next slide, we also do capital grants for things like gyms, turfs, courts, club rooms. That includes renovations, new builds, repairs and maintenance, and so on. But it's always, if you are looking to develop a facility and apply for funding, it's really good to have the facility being multi-purpose. And it's great to hear that tennis and badminton are building some relationships by the sounds of it. That's good to see, and that may translate in time to shared facilities. I don't know. But the more multi-purpose a facility is, the more attractive it is for NZC to invest in. And that's, I'm probably speaking on behalf of most funders, not just NZCT and not just Class 4 funders, but all sorts of funders out there. If we can get, if a facility can get more intensively used by multiple different types of community groups or sporting codes and so on, that really bumps up your application. In terms of the timing of an application for a capital, if it is a build that you're doing, and you're talking large hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, fundraising requirements, it's best to come to NZCT and Class 4 funders in general towards the end of your fundraising project. And that's just to do with some of the idiosyncrasies of Class 4 funding. We have a legislative requirement to award and distribute our funding more or less within a quarter, within 3 months. So it's not really helpful for us to award a grant for a capital project at this, if you need to raise $2 million, for example, and let's say we awarded you $100,000, but you've still got 1.9 million to go. It might take some time, obviously, for you to raise that, and we'll start to get really anxious about getting that money out the door. And we won't want to give it to you if you're not ready to build. So the typical pattern might be that you might raise a quarter or a third of your funding from maybe your own community. You might go to, after that, you might go to lottery grant board, or other sort of funders that are more comfortable funding at the front end. And then you come to NZCT or other Class 4 funders towards the end. So if it was an easier $2 million project, when you past the hump, you're considerably past halfway, that's when you maybe start having a conversation with us. Yeah. I'll just check if I got any more notes on this one, Sam. Yeah, look, and in terms of overall, both for capital grant applications you might make to us and for OPEX grants, NZCT is more interested in funding your needs rather than your wants. So things that really you identified as being critical for the success of your club or your association, your region. We're more interested in and another point, we're more interested in funding. If we've got $1 to spend on badminton, we want to spend that $1 enabling more people to participate in badminton, or to remove barriers for people to participate in badminton. We'd rather spend money on that than spending $1 on your elite team or your elite players or the pointy end of your funnel of talent. We're less interested in the talented few and more interested in the participating many. So things you can do to requests that you can make that sort of demonstrate that you're reducing barriers to participation in your sport, and helping improve improve the quality of the experience for those many, but we're much less interested in improving the experience or the quality of the experience for the talented few, if that makes sense, hopefully. And I'll just check if I've got any other notes. No, it's all my notes on that slide. This is a little bit about some of the technicalities of applying to us. Most of you will know it's online these days with a system we have called Flux, which one or two other funders use as well. We have monthly meetings, but no deadlines as such. So it's really about getting your application in, and when it reaches the top of our pile, we'll put it in excuse me. We'll put it in the next available meeting. So we say give yourself up to 10 weeks. So be careful if you're applying for event-related costs, or if you really need some uniforms before the start of the season or whatever it might be. Do give yourself lots of time. We can turn around grants much more quickly than 10 weeks, especially smaller ones, but give yourself up to 10 weeks. Now, we fund specific purposes. Some funders can say, here's some money, go and do what you do and report back to us at the end of your whatever given period and tell us about how you got on. For us, NZCT, and for Class 4 funders, we have to fund specific things. We have to fund specific bits of equipment, specific salary, or specific costs that you can evidence in your application. And so what's really critical to remember is that you must spend it on what we have told you you can spend it on. And if you don't, you run a really serious, well, in short, you've actually broken the law, because there's lots of legislation around our grants. So be really careful. If you get a grant from us and then you go, actually, we don't really need, we've got some money elsewhere for that, or you know what, we've got this more important thing that we need to spend on. please make sure you get in touch with us and talk to us about it, because there's a pretty good chance we'll say no, that's not going to be possible. And if you do go off and spend the money, it will, by law, you'll need to give it back, and you need to find the money from somewhere else. So that's sort of to my bullet point there about accountability. Your reputation with us is really only as good as your last grant and how well you've accounted for it. So it's getting the money is great, but you must be really careful about that accountability. And something I've got the word retrospectivity there. For us, that's about the date that we make the decision on your application, not the date you submit it or the date that it gets processed, but the date that our committee decide what the outcome of your application is. Anything that you've already spent money on prior to that decision day is what we call retrospective. And it is, again, it's illegal for us to award money for a purpose that is retrospective, and it's illegal for you to apply for it. So please be careful about that. And yeah, look, one application per annum is what we prefer. It helps you to concentrate your mind on what your priorities are, and it's just less work for you and less work for us. Now, you can stack up different things in that application. You can put CapEx and various different types of operational costs and so on. It can all go in the one application, but yeah, ideally one per year. It's not a hard rule, but it's just good for you and us if we stick to one a year. Yep, so we could move on to the next slide, which is, oh, well, that's the end actually. So look, there's our website, lots more information there. It's always a bit kind of awkward talking to a screen, but the one thing I would say to wrap up, although there might be some questions, is we raise money through game machine venues in communities throughout New Zealand. It's really important that you acknowledge their role in raising the funds. Without those partnerships, we can't raise the money. And so if you do get a grant, please think of ways you can acknowledge the venues in your area who've helped raise that money that we help distribute back to you. So I think that's probably about 10 minutes, Sam. Happy to take any questions.
That was fantastic, mate, and thank you for that. Really enjoy hearing how it all works. I know you've funded my salary before in the past, so I certainly appreciate it. For everyone who's listening, please do submit questions through the chat now. We'll be keeping an eye on them. We do have one question submitted in advance that I'll read out first. So Ben, how are sporting clubs expected to survive as gaming machines are reduced in low socio-economic areas and funding dries up? A tough one.
Look, yeah, and it's a game machine. Yeah, firstly, I'll just say game machines venues, yeah, they're throughout New Zealand. Some of them are in low socio-economic communities, some of them are not. I won't sort of talk too much about that. I don't think the facts are actually out there as to what it is. But what I would say is I don't have an answer. It would be my answer. Councils throughout New Zealand have been looking to reduce, many of them, not all of them, have a sinking lid policy, which means that if a venue closes, the machines turn off, they can't be turned on again anywhere else. And so across New Zealand over the last 15, 20 years, maybe getting close to half of the machines that were there are gone. What hasn't happened, and the reason for doing it, the rationale is that there's a sense that it reduces problem gambling. That unfortunately is not the case. Over the same period of time, half the machines have gone, but the rate of problem gambling has stayed consistent. It's this is the Ministry of Health statistics, I think it's 0.02% of New Zealanders identify as having issues. So it's a rather blunt tool that doesn't solve the problem. And now with online gambling, it's actually potentially shifting the problem online, where there's no controls, no regulations currently, no GSTs even it's all the money goes offshore, and the problem is hidden in people's lounges and bedrooms where they can gamble without any without any duty of care from those that provide the service online. So it's a worrying trend. gaming machines are reducing. The community benefit that is accrued from those machines is reducing. All I can say is I don't know how you're going to replace that funding. And all I could say really is advocate, if you value this funding, by all means, please advocate when your local council is reviewing their Class 4 gaming policy, and try and highlight and we've got some facts and figures on our website that it's a blunt tool that doesn't work, shifts the problem online, where there's no return to the New Zealand community, and there's no duty of care. That's all I can say.
No, that was great. That was great. And we've got 2 question statements. This first one, okay, is about the funding of admin or general manager type roles. They say that a lot of the time, all of the organisation of programs is done by the admin person who liaises with schools, clubs, and those sorts of people, organises the coaches, and does the mahi. These people are generally the drivers to make the key programs happen. So it's a bit of a shame that some of these roles aren't seen in the same light as others, such as development officers. Is there anything you'd like to talk to them?
Yeah, look, what's in a name, really? Look, if the job title doesn't really best express the scope of the role, you just need to make sure that you emphasise that in your application. If we see that the role is a sort of a front-facing, hands-on role, then yeah, it doesn't matter about the job title. It's all about the outputs and the outcomes of that role. So we do fund general manager roles, and we do fund admin roles. We understand small, lean organisations, you wear many hats. One job title, but many jobs. So we understand that. You just make sure it's really clear to us when you apply.
Fantastic. And this looks like the last one from Ross. How do we set amount of capital request grant? Is there a formula? So
there are lots of factors go into how we land on an amount that we award a capital application. You might not get anything at all, of course, but if you do, we will have had to factor in a whole bunch of things, like how much money do we raise in the area that you're applying from. Again, as I said earlier, we try and return the funds back into the same community. It's the only fair way of doing it. And so if we have a small presence or no presence in your area, then you're going to get less or no money. We also look at the we're juggling what else we've got come across our desk at the same time. We have to look at you need to evidence what kind of return there is to the community by building this facility or whatever it is you're doing. So the greater the return to the community, the greater, the more participation it enables, the greater the need. Then you make a case, a business case for why we should put X dollars into your project, and we'll respond to that. We'll consider what you've said and try and, if it looks good, we'll give you as much as we're able to, and what we think is proportional. It's one size doesn't fit all. I'm sorry, there's no clear criteria for that.
No, fantastic. So Ben, thank you very much for. Yep, sorry.
So look, Sam, I think there's some sort of follow-up comment here that I can see. I think it's from Nikki as well. That's. Oh wait, so I can actually read it here, Sam. Let me just have a look at this. Sorry, it's a separate question. The problem is there's one particular community in Wellington region that has no longer has gaming machines. Only one funding provider will fund in that region. As you can imagine, that will only put up with applications so often. Do councils actually have some sway on game machines being reinstated? They absolutely have a say. Every territorial local authority sets a game machine policy, and I touched on that before, perhaps not very clearly, but the presence of game machines is dictated by a gaming policy of your local council, and they review that policy every 3 years, and it's staggered across the country, different councils at different times, and they can either have a sinking lid policy, which means, like I talked about before, they could have a cap, and you might have machines the number of machines might be lower than that cap, and so there can actually be growth, or or they could just have a completely open, have as many machines as you want. I don't think many councils have that, but a lot have sinking lids now. So yeah, you'll need to, again, lobby local council if you want that to happen. And it's only fair if there's no money's being raised by society in a certain area, it's not reasonable to, generally speaking, to return money raised in a different community into that community.
No, absolutely, and that makes sense. I know a lot of our associations across the country are a little bit nervous as things change. It'll be very, very interesting to watch this space over the coming few years, and I'm sure you would agree. I think that now is the last of our questions. So Ben, huge thank you for joining us today. You're welcome to head off, enjoy the rest of your evening. And if anyone does have any last questions that we can't answer, what I'll do.
We've lost, I don't know if everyone else has lost you, Sam, but I can't hear you. I'm not sure. Are you still talking?
Okay.
Oh, here you are, you're back.
I'm back. Okay, sorry. Not sure what happened there. It's my Airbnb internet, I'd say. But Ben, thank you for joining us. I'll let you head off now. Enjoy your evening. And I'll now welcome David King up to chat about Te Manawa funding. Te Manawa funding is something that we in badminton know that we need to do a lot better on. Our sport does a fantastic job delivering key programs to rangatahi and girls across the country, and this fund is directly applicable to all of those key programs. So, David, I'd love to hear your chat today, and thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Shumai Borida and kia ora, everybody. Thanks for coming along and listening in. The Te Manawa Fund, I look after the Te Manawa Fund in the Manawatu region. So what you will need to understand is that each regional sports association or trust has their own ways of dealing with Te Manawa. So in your region, the most important thing that you can do is actually contact your regional sports trust and talk to the people in there that are looking after the funding in their area, because each region will have its slight differences. Te Manawa funding comes from Sport New Zealand. It's $16 million a year spread across the country, and it is targeted specifically at providing opportunities for certain priority groups of play, active recreation, or sport. Okay, so it doesn't necessarily just have to be sport, it can be those other two areas as well. The key about it is it's all about projects that are getting inactive youth active. So if you are going and delivering a program into a primary school, for example, yes, you are dealing with the tamariki, which is the age range that we're interested in. But if you're simply going in and delivering broadly to a whole class of kids, there's no guarantee that you're targeting the inactive kids. So you have to be quite specific in how you structure your applications and how you target your audience. It's not like the old Kiwi sport where you could have a program and go in and just roll class out after class in a school, and it was all about the numbers. Te Manawa is all about the quality of the program that you're delivering and who you're delivering it to, and that they actually want to do it. It is a demand-driven fund. So in your application, you have to show that there is a demand for the project that you are actually running. So you have to have the voice of the participant as evidence in your application. Next slide, Sam. Are you there, Sam? All right, great, thank you. The priority groups, the first three bullet points here are general right across all of New Zealand. They're Sport New Zealand priority groups, and they exist because we know that those particular areas are where the inactivity occurs. We know that, for example, young women who, when they leave secondary school, tend to drop out of physical activity. So hence, young woman goes up to the age of 24, whereas the male counterparts are less likely to. They do, but they're less than the females. So our priority when it comes to males is 5 through to 18. Disabled people obviously have significant barriers to participating in active recreation or sport. So they're one of our priority groups as well. And in Manawatu, each RST can specify particular priority groups that relate to their community. In Manawatu, one of our priority groups is refugees and migrants, because both Palmerston North and Levin are settlement cities in our area. So we set that as a priority group because we know they face significant barriers to getting involved in sport and recreation. And Te Manawa is about providing funding that removes those barriers and enables them to become active. So who can apply? The beauty about Te Manawa is that just about anybody can apply to the fund as long as they are a legal entity. All right, so you as an individual cannot apply. But if you're a legal entity like a school, a marae, a not-for-profit incorporated society, or a for-profit business, and you're running a project that is targeting those priority groups and getting inactive youth active, you can apply to our fund. Next, Sam. What we fund, again, it's a project-based funder. So when you put your program together, you have to provide us with a budget. And basically any costs that are involved in putting your program together can be applied for. What we won't fund, this will probably come up on the next slide a little bit, but what we won't fund is annual salaries. All right, but if you've got a development officer that's working full time and they spend, say, 10% of their time on a particular project that's getting inactive youth active, you can include that 10% of their salary in your budget and in your application. But we won't, you can't simply come to us and ask for a salary for a person who's going into schools delivering badminton or tennis or table tennis programs to the kids. All right, you have to have the whole package together as one and show a lot of other stuff. We don't fund retrospective programs, just like most funders. If you've already spent the money, sorry, it's too late. In Manawatu, we don't do multi-year funding. There's only about 2 regions in New Zealand that does. There's 2 RSTs that are experimenting with it to see how it works. I'm pretty sure one of them is Bay of Plenty. Again, that's one of those things you need to check out with your local RST. We don't obviously fund professional athletes or academies or teams going away on trips or to tournaments. Reason is quite obvious, because those kids are already active. So those programs are not getting them active. We don't fund the cost of the tournaments. Capital costs we don't fund. So if you were in a school and you wanted to build a playground to increase play for the inactive kids within the school, we haven't got the money to fund capital works, so we won't fund those sorts of things. We also won't fund what we call business as usual costs. So if you're running a club and you've got your normal rent and your normal internet and power and those sorts of things, those are your business as usual costs. They're not related to a specific project where you're getting inactive youth active. I talked about the salaries. And Sport New Zealand, we obviously don't fund anyone that has a direct investment partnership with Sport New Zealand. So in trying to decide whether this is the right fund for you, there's 4 key points that I break it down to with our area. Number 1, is your project getting inactive youth active? If the answer is yes, keep going. Number 2, what are the barriers that are preventing them from being active? Now, that's really important because the fund is there to provide the money to take those barriers away. And we know some of the high deprivation areas, they face barriers like they don't have transport to be able to get to sport. They don't have the costs or the money to spend on fees. They don't even have shoes. They don't have equipment. So those are genuine barriers, and we would expect you to show us how you're removing those barriers, and that would normally come through in your budget items, where it might be that you're actually going out to schools and providing buses and transporting the kids to a venue in order to take part when they otherwise wouldn't be able to. Here in the Manawatu, that's quite a relevant thing for us, particularly with the rural schools communities that we have through the Te Ara district and the Manawatu district particularly. So those rural schools face those transport barriers. So we know when they're making applications around that sort of thing that that's a real barrier. And the last point is there a need for the program that you're running? So can you show us that, you know, there is an activity in that particular area, in the particular sport or recreation you're involved in? And do you have proof of demand? Because it's all very well coming up with a great scheme and a great project where you're going to go and deliver it and you're hoping that people will turn up. We won't fund you if you're hoping people will turn up. You have to show us that you've done the legwork beforehand. You've talked to the participant, the voice of the rangatahi, the voice of the tamariki. You've talked to the schools, if you're trying to go into schools, that they have shown that there is a demand, that kids are inactive, and that this program will help them become active. So if you go through those key points before you head off into an application, you will save yourself some time. One of the really great things about Te Manua is that just about every single RST will have it. It's called an expression of interest, where instead of doing a full application, you can complete an expression of interest. Ours is online. Most of the others will be via their websites as well. And that expression of interest is really a tick the box form and a very brief description about what your project's going to be about. Not a lot of detail, no budget, just a sum of what the amount of funding that you want, roughly. And you submit it. It'll take you about 5 to 10 minutes. When those come into me, I immediately go through them, and within 24 hours, I will have replied back to the person and indicated to them whether it's worthwhile them doing an application, and if they are going to do an application, to make sure that they cover off some key points, and I'll list what those points are based on what their project's around. Here, even when an application comes in, I'll go through it. I see my role as to make the application as strong as it possibly can be. I don't make the decisions of yes or no. We have decision-making panels in each area, in each RST. They structure a panel which goes through the applications and makes the decisions. My job is to make your application as strong as it can possibly be before it goes in front of the panel. So when the application comes in, I'll go through it and I'll work with the person who's made the application if there's areas of weakness and try and gather more information to try and make it as strong as we possibly can. In terms of types of funds, just about every RST has what's called a large fund and a small fund. Right, the small fund is for here in Manawatu, it's for applications up to $10,000. The large fund is for applications between 10 and 40,000. We run the large fund twice a year. There's 2 rounds that we run. Our small fund is open continuously all the time, and we do a 10 working day turnaround in that. So you have a decision in 10 days. Different RSTs will do that in different ways. So that's where it's really important that you have those conversations. I can't urge you enough to make contact. Pick up the phone, ring the person who looks after Te Manua at your local RST and just chat with them. Set up a coffee meeting with them, whatever. Send them an email, whichever works for you, but make that dialogue before you go ahead and charge into an application and make sure you're on the right track. So that's about it, Sam.
No, fantastic. And hopefully you can all hear me now. I know it's cutting in and out a little bit on my side, so apologies for that. I think the really key message that I always tell our associations, and I think you've done a great job reiterating that right now, is really a partnership I see between the organisation that's doing the applying and the RST themselves. Absolutely reach out in the first instance and have a chat, have a conversation, explain what you're looking to do, because everything we find, whether it's Sport Canterbury, Sport Bay of Plenty, or over with me in Hawke's Bay, they really just want to help you get the money out the door and grow the sport. So that is my absolute #1 tip if you take anything away from this, because David and all of his colleagues around the country are fantastic to support your organisations. David, we do have one question here from Andrew. How do you get proof from 5 to 8-year-olds that they want and will take on the activity?
Yeah, that's a great question, Andrew, and it's one that often comes up. The answer is really quite simple. You go and you talk to the teachers in the school, and you get the teachers to talk to the students and ask them, let's say it's a badminton project that you want to run in the school, then see if the students are interested in badminton. Show them a little video about what the program is about. Do they want to actually do it or not? Then get that response and get that feedback back from the staff of the school. So it's actually tapping into them, because at the end of the day, there's absolutely no value in going into a school and running a program that the kids actually don't want to do.
No, fantastic, fantastic. And I know, no, that was great. And I know we got a question earlier, but I think you've done a pretty good job covering it. I'm not sure if you'd like to add anything else, but it was just, do you have any idea or any tips on how Te Manawa differs between the regions? Or from my perspective, supporting our associations, I certainly see a lot of similarity, and everyone's really looking to target rangatahi tamariki, target girls and young people, and really support any disenfranchised communities.
Yeah, I mean, the general principles that Sport New Zealand want to focus the money onto is that age bracket growth, the rangatahi and the tamariki and the young woman, right? Now, there's more priority in those age groups on people that we know have obvious barriers, like the disability sector. All right, high deprivation communities, they have obvious barriers. So you still have to be focused in that age group, but it's easier to argue your case if you're targeting those specific groups, because we know those barriers exist. Same with young women between the ages of 19 and 24. So generally across New Zealand, those are the general guidelines. All right, now within an RST, there will be subtle differences that they'll apply to projects that come in. Again, it's a case of really arguing your case, having that conversation beforehand, and just making sure that what you're trying to do is, number one, getting inactive youth active. So it's not just targeting a real open, broad audience. You're actually specifically targeting those inactive youth and trying to engage them in activity.
Fantastic. And we have another question that's just popped through. If you run a program in 1 year and it's... Oh, fantastic, champion.
Yeah. Now, again, another great question. Yep. And you certainly can come back and fund again. You'll need to show that the barriers still exist, because we're very aware of the fact, especially when you're dealing with some of those communities, the high deprivation communities, we're aware of the fact that if we fund a program and it runs in the community, and then they come back to us for more funding to keep it running, and we say no, that as soon as the money's not there, the barrier comes back up, and therefore the kids become inactive again, right? We know that. So some programs need reoccurring funding, but what we will look for within those programs is how you're going to try and make it sustainable moving forward beyond. Because Te Manawa is here for 4 years. We're in year 3 or 4. We're in the process of gathering a lot of data to go back to government to try and re-secure money to go beyond that again, to prove that the fund is worthwhile. So there's no guarantee beyond 2 years from, well, this is the 3rd year, 1 more year after this. So there's no more guarantees after that at this stage. So you've got to try and build some sustainability into your programs and try and look for other ways of funding things, or create sustainability by, if you're going into a school delivering a program, train the teachers so that the teachers can keep doing it after you're not there. It's those sorts of things we specifically look for. We look at it a lot in Manawatu here. We have a healthy active learning team, as all other regions across New Zealand do, which are advisors working in our low decile primary schools and working with the teachers to improve the quality of physical education teaching that's going on. When we get an application for anybody wanting to go into one of those schools, the first thing they have to do is actually meet with our healthy active learning team, and the healthy active learning team has to be happy that that program will fit with the school and is going to develop the teachers. What we want to move away from is what used to happen in the past, where outside providers would simply come in, the teacher would go and get a cup of coffee, the outside provider would run their program and then disappear. Now, that's fine while you're there for 2 or 3 weeks, but once you're gone, the teacher hasn't learned anything, the kids are no better off. So yes, you can reapply, and in fact, in Manawatu, you can reapply more than once a year for programs. You can apply many times. There's no restriction on it. Hard and rural communities where they have school buses to get home and can, yep. that's exactly the transport barriers that we're talking about. So you need to use some innovation. Go to the school rather than try and bring the kids to you, if it's possible. You have to try and think of ways that are out of the box, out of the ways that they were done in the past. Any other questions?
No, that appears to be us. I'm hoping everyone can hear me. Thank you very much, David. Provided everyone can hear me, I'll let you head off with your evening. It has been really important learning about Te Manawa today. I've really appreciated it and really enjoyed connecting with you and your colleagues around the country. So thank you very much for everything you do for the sport.
Thanks a lot, Sam. And thanks to everyone out there for what you're doing and delivering stuff. Well done. Good luck.
We'll next be speaking with Amy McKinnon from Tauranga City Council. She oversees the event space in particular, so keep in mind that when you are running an event, a junior event in particular, you can absolutely connect with your councils and learn about the grants that they offer. It's a massive opportunity to connect and support the sustainability of your programs. It's something that in the badminton community, at least, we don't do a fantastic job with. So I'm really excited to hear from Amy, and yeah, please chat away.
Thank you, Sam. Yes, so my name is Amy McKinnon. I'm the Event Development Manager here at Tauranga City Council. So my team, we have an event funding framework, and that's made up of 5 different funds. And so that's what my team manages. And alongside that, we also have an event facilitation team. And their role is for events that take place in public open space. And they basically work alongside event organisers and hold their hand through all the operational requirements that come with running events in public open space. This first slide that you can see there gives you an example of how our framework is set up. I'm going to give you some information, some general information about event funding and some examples for us here in Tauranga, but every council will obviously be slightly different. So we've got these 5 funds, and they range from community level events right through to our international major events. I guess the key to remember here is that we're looking for both social and economic benefits to the city through these funds. So whether you're applying to us or another council, sorry, can we flick back there, Sam, for a second? So yeah, depending on whatever fund you're applying to, whichever council, they will all have be structured in a different way. So it's really important, and I think this is a message that you've already heard from the other presenters, is go onto their websites and make sure that you read all the information that's there. We've definitely got a lot of detail there that you can read. Work out what fund you think you might want to apply to, and then get in touch with us. We can talk through whether you're eligible, and you can start that process. So that probably leads to the next slide there, Sam. So am I eligible to apply? I'm not expecting you to be able to read all the detail that's there. That's really just a snapshot to give you an idea that there will be restrictions within the event space depending on what council you apply to. So similar to the other presenters, we have restrictions. We won't fund private individuals. We also don't fund activations or conventions. We won't cover your business as usual costs, which I think again has been a similar theme you've heard about this evening. So we fund the costs that relate specifically to the event, but not the other costs surrounding it. So just really, really key to make sure you read and check that. And if you're not sure, do talk to your local council. On to the next slide there, Sam. So I know that timeframes is a fairly basic level of information, but I think it's one of the most important things to focus on when you apply. So depending on what fund and what council you apply to, the process could be bi-monthly, it could be quarterly, it could be 6-monthly, or it could be annually. we definitely give an indication of how long our evaluation process is, and often councils' websites will tell you that in advance. So, for example, with our Tauranga Western Bay Community Event Fund, it runs a bi-monthly window for that fund. So we've got 2 months that it's open for, and then within a month after that closing date, you will find out the decision on funding. So it's really important that you think through that. You think about when your event is taking place, because if your event is happening 2 or 3 weeks after a funding decision, then the evaluation panel is going to take that into account. They're going to consider, well, the event's been launched, it's about to be delivered. Does this applicant really need that funding? So another key when you apply is if you apply through to us, we want to make your application the best possible application it could be. So if you apply early, then we will review that content. We will check if there's areas that need clarification, and we'll give you some suggestions for other content that you could include. If you apply the week prior to the fund closing, then you're going to lose that opportunity. Another area to think about is just that application process. Similar to some of the other presenters, we've got an online process here in Tauranga. So we use Smarty Grants, which is used by a few other councils as well within New Zealand. And that allows you to create your application, go in later and edit it, and once you're ready to submit, you submit your application. And then I guess finally an area here to think about is when you'll receive funding. Again, with us, we would typically give 50% prior to an event, and then 50% of the funding once we've received a post-event report. So that's a requirement for us. So think about your cash flow and how that will work when you're delivering an event. On to the next slide there, Sam. So this slide shows you some of our fund criteria. So we've got an overarching within our framework. We've got some core values. So you can see those 3 values there. And then we have a selection of priorities. And again, every council is going to have a different version of this. What's key when you're looking at this is make sure that you actually do that research into what those values are, what the council's looking for from you in the application. And then as far as areas where there are priorities, don't get caught into the trap of thinking that you have to select all. We say select the ones and answer the ones that are relevant to your event, and we're not trying to trick you there. Far better to select the ones that are relevant for you, answer those properly, than try and stretch your event over multiple priorities that aren't actually going to help you through the scoring process. So just be really, really clear about that. And I guess the last thing is that when you are filling in that application form, make sure that you look on whatever council and get an idea of their strategic thinking. So often there'll be a council vision or strategic documents that you can read to see where that council is heading in the event space or broader. And that last slide there is, I guess I'm keen to get into the detail a wee bit and just think about some tips for when you are writing your application. The first one is clarity. So as we all know, when we get into the thick of projects like this, we think we're being really clear, but getting another colleague or someone else to read what you've written to make sure it's really clear, to just check it all for you, is really important rather than rushing to apply. Another area is consistency. So if you can check and make sure that whatever assumptions you're making in your application form, if you're attaching a budget or supporting documents, make sure that whatever you've said in one document actually flows through to the other. Another tip is elaborate. So if you make a statement about your particular event, if you've actually got data, if we ran the event a previous year and you know certain number of people came along, reference that. The more information you have, the better. and state the obvious. And this can be hard, again, when we're in the thick of an event or a project, that you get caught up and maybe not realize there are many things that you do or that the event is that you just think are obvious, but actually need to be included in an application form. You might be dealing with a contact at council and they might know all about your event, but that's not necessarily the person who will be evaluating your application. So although some things might be really obvious, do include them. For example, if you've got a health and safety question and you talk about health and safety planning, are you actually going to write a health and safety plan? Make sure you state these really obvious things, but sometimes they are missed out in applications. And placement. So really useful to use supporting documents if you have them when you apply, but don't put them purely in your supporting documents. So make sure they are still referenced in the core application document. My next tip is to be realistic. So when you're writing about attendance numbers or you're looking at your budget, with attendance numbers, don't try to inflate them or round them up too much. The reality is whatever evaluation panel that you're submitting to, they'll know about similar events. They'll have industry knowledge. So yeah, don't be tempted to inflate what figures you're putting in an application. And in a similar vein with your budget, don't play down other income streams that you might have in your budget. If you've got other in-kind support or you've got other funding secured, it's not actually going to be of detriment to your application if you include it. Actually, from our perspective, it's a really good bonus. If you've bothered to go out and actively look for other income streams, then that actually is going to make your event score better through the process, because we will never fund 100% of an event, and we want it to be viable, and we want to know that you're actively looking for funding. The other areas that I've got here is thinking about your applicant. So when we're submitting any application, think about who will receive that funding. So we'll typically have our standard terms and conditions, which you need to review, and make sure that whoever the entity is that's applying for funding, that they are going to be the people responsible for delivering that event. And a few other just notes there with conflict of interest and other areas like that. Again, they'll come up in whatever council you apply to, but don't be afraid to state things in that. We're not trying to trip you up again. It's better to declare information all up front than hold something back at the application process. I guess just to finish up, if I was going to suggest anything of all of this, it would be to apply early. The earlier you apply to a council, the more chance you've got to make sure that you're actually applying to the right fund, that we can give you feedback, and that, that would just be my biggest tip for anyone listening tonight, is apply early. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Amy. Really great to hear from Tauranga City Council. They are a fantastic partner of Badminton New Zealand and have been for many, many years. We really do appreciate working with you and also all of the other councils around the country. Just like with David, the first thing we always do when we apply for an event, it is get on the phone, have a conversation with the council, understand their priorities, and making sure that our event can align to their priorities as well, and that we can support each other as best possible. If anyone does have any questions, please fire them through now. However, it's looking quite quiet there. I think you must have covered everything really, really clearly, which is fantastic. It's quite quiet. So thank you so much, Amy, for joining us and sticking with us for the whole hour. Really appreciate it. The last thing we are going to do tonight is have a quick Q&A. If anyone has any questions to ask our experts, Sandra and Colleen, who do funding applications on the daily. If there's any tips you would like on efficiencies, if there's anything at all that you would like to ask them, please fire them through the chat now, and we'll see what support we can help. If you feel you need any resources or examples or templates after this webinar, again, pop in the chat what you would like, or reach out to myself or Ellie, and we will be able to organise those for you as well. Sandra, is there anything you would like to add?
I'd probably, just to give people an idea of what funding we've got, I might just give you an idea of what we've got this year. So in January, we applied to Pub Charity for our junior programs, reps, and hall hire towards those programs and schools competitions. We also applied for entry fees into tournaments and shuttles, and we were awarded $39,900 from Pub Charity. And that lasts us until December, so it was about a year's worth of funding there. We also applied to Lion Foundation halfway through last year, so in July of 2021. So that funding was towards hall hire for our Thursday night badminton league and towards some more shuttles that we use for all of our programs and events. And that lasted 12 months. So that return was done in July of this year, and we got $35,000 towards that. In September 2021, we applied to NZCT towards for salaries towards 2 staff members. We had the executive manager and the general manager, and we got 36,000 towards that, and that lasted until May of this year. And in March of this year, we applied to the Te Manawa Fund for Let's Make a Racket project for the delivery within schools, after school, and towards targeted demographics. And we got awarded $35,000 towards that. And finally, in February this year, we applied to Sport Manawatu Event Partnership Fund towards some of our big events that we run here, and which also included the new Manawatu International that we were going to run November, December time now, actually. And we were awarded $30,000 towards those. So in total, from halfway through 2021, we were awarded $176,000 towards our programs. That's just, I suppose, to give you a snapshot of what's possible. When I first arrived 10 years ago, I was chuffed to get $12,000 from the Kiwi Sport Manawatu Fund. Absolutely chuffed, actually, to get $12,000. So yeah, so it is possible to start small and then work your way up. As some of the presenters have already said, once you can show that your organization is working on development, working on delivery, working on structure within your organization, and is becoming more and more successful in what you do, they do seem to be happier to fund you because they can see that you're running well as an organization. So yeah, I think it's important that do show your success, tell the story of your successes, and also when you do your funding returns, put in your development reports, put in your event reports, put in your numbers, put in the photos, put in everything that tells the story, because that makes you and them and the partnership that you've created with them quite a lot stronger, and they will feel that they are doing the right thing in terms of funding you and continually funding you year on year. Yes. So that was something I just thought I'd share with you guys in terms of Little Manawatu Badminton has been awarded this amount of funding, and we do have 3 staff now. We have 2 full-time staff, and we have a delivery coach, a shuttle-time delivery coach on 26 hours a week. Fire through
Fantastic.
Fire through any
Go.
questions if anyone would like to ask me anything.
I'll just.
Okay, Colleen, I think you've got something to add.
Yep. I was just going to suggest we at Badminton New Zealand, we like to do a plan at the start of the year for our gaming trust applications. So I have a spreadsheet where I have entered all the gaming trusts that I know that we are able to apply to, and I have them in there for the number of times that we are able to apply to them. We also have some little notes in there about who's best to apply to for salaries or shuttles, because we find that they all have different priorities. So it's great to get really familiar with the ones that you have available to your area and then plan your applications accordingly. It is best to have a really good idea of what your big outlays are going to be for the year, and absolutely make that your priority. And you can absolutely hit for those more than once. You just have to be careful not to hit for them at the same time. So it's just being really careful. It's also really good to stay on top when you have a spreadsheet. We just have the date of when we receive the money, and then we future date it for the 3 months when your accountability is going to be due. So it just helps you keep on top of the accountabilities, and that keeps you in good stead with the organisations. So you've got a much better chance with them going forward if you're always on top of your accountabilities. Yeah, so any questions, feel free to flick them through.
Yeah, I can answer Nikki as well. Is it better to apply, as a rule, is it better to apply for one thing, i.e. shuttles at a time, or put a few things together? We do a few things together. I would, in terms of hall hire, I have taken out what is just for juniors, or mostly juniors, and I'll put that in one application along with shuttles and entry fees for a couple of the tournaments that all our juniors play in. And we found that Pub Charity is really supportive of anything that is junior Tamariki or Rangatahi based. So for the last few years, they've been very, very supportive of all of our kind of young persons programs that we run.
Fantastic. And Colleen, there's a question here from Shona that I believe would probably be quite a good one for you, as I know you and I have this conversation quite frequently.
Yep, that's fine. We have discovered there is not a really good collated list online anywhere, but I will flick my email address into the chat, and do feel free to email me and I will help you out with this depending on what your area is.
From us,
Fantastic. And
Lion Foundation have been really supportive of hall hire and shuttles for the last 8 or 9 years. They've been really supportive. Usually it's about 20,000 a year that they'll give us. We actually probably use close to $100,000 a year worth of hall hire and shuttles. So we put in the full price of the project, or what we use on an annual basis, and then they come back to us with the amount that's available at the time in that given round. But they have been very supportive of hall hire and shuttles.
Yes, and just to reiterate, please do reach out to Colleen. I know that she has a lot of information in her head, and she can absolutely tell you if you're looking for someone who's going to looking for a salary grant, she will tell you who's most likely to support you. If you're looking for shuttles or something junior focused, she can help with that. So please do reach out, particularly if you're a badminton from our badminton community. Otherwise, tennis, I'd strongly suggest you reach out to Ellie. Otherwise, look, Colleen and I would be happy to help as well. If there's no other questions, I think we will call it for the night. We've gone a little bit over due to some great chats. Thank you everyone for joining us. Badminton community, please reach out to me with your thoughts and anything that you would like to share. If you have any ideas or really anything that we could help you with next year in our continued webinar series, please do reach out. Otherwise, final note from me before it looks like Ellie wants to jump in, is that we will still be having our social media webinar on 5th of December. So pop online, give that a register, and we'll catch up with you then. Over to Ellie.
Thanks very much, Badminton. Thank you, Sandra and Colleen as well. Some really great information there. I thank badminton clubs for allowing us to join you, and thanks for the tennis clubs for coming in. I'd just like to add one little piece from me. We have in the past through this year run funding workshops as well, and going back to the council with getting your applications in early, and Colleen alluded to it a little bit as well. Really planning is important. So linking your planning to a budget, so you've got a budget linked to your funding plan, and also having your facilities management plan linked into your budget as well. For our tennis clubs, and we're really happy if the badminton clubs would like to pop on our website, we have a toolkit with all those templates there, plus a step-by-step planning process to give you an idea of what you should be looking to do and the documents you need to get in line. So please feel free. Tennis.kiwi will get you onto our website, and then you can look under clubs and there's a toolkit. That planning is essential. It's great to know your planner, your funders, and as Colleen has said, they change, and just knowing that criteria fairly regularly. But please have a look at our toolkit. It's there to make your lives easier. So that's for badminton clubs as well. Please go and take what you need. And thanks very much to you all. Thank you very much.
No, thank you, Ellie. And that is a fantastic portal on your website that you have. Really appreciate sharing that with everyone. And Squash New Zealand also have some fantastic resources as well. So if you need either of those links, please reach out to either Ellie or I. That will be us for the evening. Thank you so much for joining us. We will endeavour to have the recording up in case there's someone who missed it within the next few days. But best of luck for the rest of your evening and take care. Thank you.